The galaxy was vast, with civilizations spanning the stars, each boasting technology so advanced that it seemed to defy the laws of nature. Powerful species had long ago discovered methods of faster-than-light travel, force fields that could deflect nuclear blasts, weapons that could obliterate entire planets with the push of a button. In comparison, Earth, still bound by the laws of physics, still struggling with the consequences of climate change, political strife, and economic inequality, was regarded as a primitive, almost irrelevant speck in the grand cosmic scheme. The Galactic Senate was the most powerful governing body in the known universe. Representatives from hundreds of species, each with its own complex history and way of life, met in a massive hall to discuss trade agreements, resource allocations, and occasionally, military matters. And when Earth's name came up in these discussions, it was almost always met with derision or indifference. Humans were seen as little more than a curious anomaly, a species that had somehow managed to survive in a harsh and unforgiving environment without the benefit of advanced technologies. The senior commanders of the galactic forces, those who commanded fleets capable of laying waste to entire star systems, had no patience for Earth's so-called weaponry. Their own forces wielded plasma cannons, ion torpedoes, and laser grids that could slice through anything in their path. But humans, with their primitive firearms, explosives, and hand-to-hand combat techniques, were an embarrassing footnote in the history of warfare. The very thought that Earth might pose a threat to the greater galactic empire was laughable. General Zorath of the Zycro Coalition, a six-armed warrior from a planet made entirely of metal, had the most scathing view of humanity. "I've read their battle history," he said to the council in a booming voice that echoed through the chamber. "They rely on small arms, guns, they call them. What are they going to do with those? Stab a fleet of my ships with their pea-shooters? I say we ignore them. Their weapons are useless. Their entire species is obsolete." His words were met with a chorus of agreement from the other commanders. Shadra, the commander of the Tlix war caste, a species known for its mastery of biological warfare, shook her head. "Their primitive weaponry is an insult to our science. Earth's only significant contribution to the galaxy is their natural resources, rare minerals found deep in their planet's crust. I suggest we simply mine their world and move on. If they resist, we'll neutralize them as we have with countless other insignificant species." The others nodded, pleased with the simplicity of her plan. Humans, after all, had only just begun to make their first clumsy forays into space exploration. No advanced weapons, no galactic alliances, no significant military presence. The Council had seen far more dangerous species rise and fall in the blink of an eye. Earth was not even worthy of their serious consideration. At that moment, the Senate Hall's holographic map flickered, and a new report came through. It was an urgent transmission from the fleet commander overseeing the conquest of a distant star system. A human colony had been detected in a remote sector, an insignificant world, far from Earth's own solar system, with only a few thousand inhabitants. According to the report, the human settlement was a mining colony with no strategic value whatsoever. The commanders exchanged looks of disinterest, prepared to dismiss the news without a second thought. Then the report continued. The mining colony had, against all expectations, put up a fierce resistance. A fleet of Zycro warships, capable of wiping out entire planets in minutes, had attempted to subdue the colony and seize the precious resources. But when the battle began, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't panic. They didn't flee. Instead, they fought back with a level of coordination and brutality that caught the Zycro fleet completely off guard. At first, it seemed like a fluke. The Zycro ships took damage, but nothing too serious. But then the report mentioned something that made even the most experienced commanders raise their brows. A human soldier had fired a single shot from a small, handheld firearm, an outdated shotgun, at one of the warships. The blast did not destroy the ship, but it crippled its weapon systems. A single, primitive shotgun, against one of the most advanced fleets the galaxy had ever seen. The commanders were stunned. They had long believed that human weapons were nothing more than toys, artifacts of an ancient, violent era. But now, This single shot had crippled a Zychro warship. The commanders, who had scoffed at Earth's weapons and its people, felt a creeping doubt begin to form. "Impossible," Zorath muttered, staring at the report. "A shotgun? Against my ship? We need to investigate this further," Shadra said, a slight unease in her voice. "It could be a fluke, but if there is even a chance that humans have developed something more advanced than we thought, we need to neutralize it before it becomes a serious threat." The room fell into a tense silence as the implications of the report sank in. The idea that a human could damage one of the most advanced warships in the galaxy with nothing more than an old-fashioned firearm seemed absurd, yet the evidence was irrefutable. The Council had never taken humans seriously, but now they were questioning their own assumptions. The debate quickly escalated, with each commander offering their own perspective on the matter. Some argued that it was a freak occurrence, a freak accident caused by the Zychro warship's faulty systems or some other technical anomaly. Others, more cautious, suggested that Earth's military might be more advanced than anyone had given them credit for. But one thing was certain: they could no longer ignore the possibility that humans, with their outdated weapons, might pose a greater threat than they had ever imagined. In the vast, uncaring galaxy, where entire species rose and fell with little more than a flicker of interest from the greater powers, humanity had just made its first move. And it was a move that would not soon be forgotten. The commanders left the Senate Hall in silence, their minds racing. The Zychro fleet had been humbled by a single human with a shotgun. The realization settled over them like a weight, and though they were reluctant to admit it, they all shared a single thought: humanity had just earned the right to be taken seriously. And somewhere, on a distant mining world, a human soldier was preparing for the next fight, with a shotgun in hand. The Galactic Senate had long written off Earth as insignificant. Humanity's weapons, for all their historical importance, were nothing more than relics of a bygone age. As the latest wave of crises loomed over the galaxy, the Senate, composed of the most powerful and technologically advanced species, dismissed Earth's military capacity with the same condescending attitude they always had. Earth wasn't even a participant in the discussions about the ongoing war between the Oxyrian Empire and the Zalthori Coalition, two of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. Both sides had advanced weaponry far beyond anything humanity could ever conceive. That was, until the unexpected happened. An ancient alien race, the Raxians, whose power was rooted in the ability to control gravity itself, launched a surprise attack on the outer colonies of the Zalthori. The attack was swift, brutal, and effective, using advanced antimatter projectiles that could tear through shields and vaporize entire fleets. The Zalthori were thrown into disarray, and the Oxyrian Empire, already spread thin from years of war, found itself unable to respond quickly enough to the threat. The Galactic War was on the brink of turning in the Raxians' favor, and the Galactic Senate, with its vast array of resources and knowledge, was scrambling to find a solution. Yet, the answer didn't come from the high-tech war machines of the Senate's most advanced species. Instead, it came from a surprising quarter. Earth, a planet considered backward by the galaxy's standards, found itself thrust into the conflict. A small group of humans, mercenaries really, had been hired by an independent faction of Zalthori, desperate to find a way to counter the Raxian threat. Despite their primitive weaponry, these humans had long fought in wars that spanned continents, clashing against each other, against nature, and against even more powerful invaders in Earth's past. This experience made them a wild card in a galaxy of uniformed, technologically sophisticated warriors. The Senate watched in disbelief as these humans set to work with the most basic of equipment: guns, explosives, and raw ingenuity. It was a plan as simple as it was risky: infiltrate the Raxian base, disable their antimatter weaponry, and find a way to disrupt their gravity control systems. None of the commanders of the Senate, from the calculating Shadari to the energy-wielding Valith, could fathom how a race armed with nothing but simple firearms could possibly succeed against the superior technology of the Raxians. They didn't take it seriously. But when the first reports came in of human mercenaries surviving Raxian fire, the commanders were forced to pay attention. The Raxians, overconfident and smug in their dominance, underestimated the humans just as the Senate had. What followed was nothing short of a shock. The humans, using guerrilla tactics that felt primitive and crude by galactic standards, were pushing back against the Raxian forces. They used the terrain of alien planets to their advantage, outsmarting their technologically superior enemies. When the Senate heard of humans capturing Raxian command centers with nothing more than explosives and well-timed ambushes, they couldn't help but scoff in disbelief. "Impossible," they murmured. "These humans, with their laughable weapons, cannot be a real threat." The turning point came when the human leader, a grizzled veteran named Captain Elias Drake, found himself facing off against a Raxian warlord known for his unparalleled mastery of gravity manipulation. Armed with nothing more than a combat shotgun and his trademark grit, Captain Drake was an unlikely figure to stand against one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Yet, in the silence of an alien forest, as Raxian forces circled him, he grabbed his weapon and did what no galactic commander could have predicted. He fought. The Senate continued to scoff at Earth's involvement. After all, what could a human with a shotgun possibly achieve against the might of the Raxians' gravity technology? But the reports that followed painted a different picture. The human's shotgun had been modified, using a technology so primitive it almost seemed archaic, yet devastating in its simplicity. Using a mix of shockwave rounds and explosive shells, Drake managed to breach the Raxians' gravity shield, shattering the warlord's defenses. The entire Senate was in uproar. How could something so simple, so primitive, have worked? The human had just leveled the playing field, and in that moment, the galaxy's commanders felt something they hadn't felt in eons: fear. No one had considered the human element. While galactic species relied on sophisticated technology, intricate strategies, and overwhelming firepower, humanity had something else: tenacity, resourcefulness, and the willingness to adapt and fight with whatever they had at their disposal. Where others saw weakness, humans saw opportunity. The Senate's initial dismissal was now shifting into something darker: a deep unease. The idea that a human with an old-fashioned weapon could challenge the most advanced species in the galaxy was a blow to the pride of every commander in the room. They had underestimated humanity's ingenuity for too long. They had laughed at Earth's so-called primitive weapons, but now they were starting to see that the true weapon of humans wasn't their guns or their missiles. It was their ability to fight, to survive, and to turn the tide of a battle with little more than grit and determination. Captain Drake's success spread like wildfire across the battlefield. Word quickly reached the Senate, and the once dismissive commanders began to see humanity in a new light. No longer were they seen as a weak species, content with outdated weaponry. Now, Earth was beginning to stand out as a force in the galaxy, a reminder that sometimes the most primitive tools could be the most dangerous when wielded by someone determined enough to use them. As Captain Drake's group continued to wreak havoc on the Raxian forces, it became clear that Earth's primitive weapons, combined with human resourcefulness and refusal to quit, were about to change the course of the galactic war. The Senate had no choice but to start paying attention, not to the weapons themselves, but to the people who wielded them. In the face of galactic annihilation, the true strength of humanity had been revealed. The commanders who had once laughed at Earth's arsenal were now forced to admit that maybe, just maybe, they had misjudged the human race. The situation grew dire quickly. The Raxians had proven their superiority, and the Zalthori were on the brink of total collapse. Desperate, the Galactic Senate called for an emergency summit to discuss a coordinated defense against the invaders. Among the delegations, a single human representative was present: General Nicholas Ford, a former commander of Earth's space forces. Earth had been relegated to the sidelines for so long that few even recognized the human's face anymore. He was there out of formality, a token presence. Most of the Senate regarded him as little more than a relic, a reminder of Earth's so-called primitive past. But General Ford was not the kind of man to stay silent in the face of a crisis. The Senate hall buzzed with discussions, but Ford sat at the table, calm and collected, studying the projections on the screen. The Raxian strategy was clear: destroy the colonies, cripple the Zalthori's ability to fight back, and then proceed with an unstoppable assault on the Senate itself. The Senate members continued to argue, debating theoretical weapons and hypothetical strategies, but none had anything that could counter the Raxian force. It was at that moment that Ford stood, his chair scraping against the floor, his gaze sweeping across the room. The room fell silent. "We don't need plasma torpedoes or quantum weapons," Ford said, his voice firm and steady, carrying a weight that no one expected. "We need to stop underestimating the one thing the Raxians don't understand. The one thing that has kept humanity alive through every catastrophe we've faced. We need to fight dirty. We need to fight like we always have." The room erupted in disbelief and laughter. The idea that Earth, whose technology had been laughed off for centuries, could provide a solution was absurd. A Zilnath representative, one of the oldest and most technologically advanced species, scoffed openly. "You expect us to rely on humans and their primitive weapons to save us from the Raxians? Their guns are obsolete, their tactics archaic. They're no match for our fleets." Ford remained undeterred, his expression unwavering. "You think I'm talking about some high-tech weapon? No. I'm talking about something simple. A human weapon. A shotgun. And the will to survive." Laughter echoed through the hall, but Ford ignored it, his mind focused on one thing: Earth's legacy of ingenuity. For all the technological advancements that the galaxy had, it still lacked something humanity had in abundance: a brutal resourcefulness that had allowed it to survive against all odds. From the trenches of World War I to the space-faring battles against alien invaders, humans had adapted and fought, never relying on technology alone, but on their capacity to think in a crisis. The Senate continued to mock, but Ford's words had taken root in a few of the more battle-hardened members. A few began to look at the human differently. The Senate had ignored Earth's military history for too long, and it had ignored the human spirit, the indomitable will to fight no matter the odds. Ford's voice cut through the murmurs. "You don't understand. The Raxians will think we're weak. They'll think they can wipe us out like they've wiped out everyone else. But that's their mistake. We're not a sophisticated race of invincible warriors. We're survivors. And if you underestimate us, you're dead." It was a gamble. Ford knew it. The idea of using Earth's technology, a relic from the distant past, against an enemy with such advanced weaponry seemed nonsensical. But that was exactly what made it brilliant. The Raxians would expect the obvious weapons: lasers, antimatter bombs, energy pulses. But Ford didn't need that. He just needed something simple, something that would confuse and disorient an enemy used to fighting with the highest level of technology. The Senate's laughter quieted, though still tinged with disbelief. Ford's words had struck a chord, but none of them had yet realized the truth. They were still trapped in their own arrogance, unable to grasp what humanity could bring to the table. They didn't know it yet, but the simplicity of what Ford proposed would soon change everything. What the aliens didn't realize was that sometimes the simplest tool, when wielded by the right hands, could be the most devastating weapon of all. As the summit drew to a close, Ford made his way to a quiet corner of the room, where a small group of human delegates waited. "Get the shotgun ready," he said, his voice low but determined. "It's time to remind them what Earth's made of." In the days that followed, General Ford's words spread across the Senate like wildfire. Some remained skeptical, but others, those who had seen enough war, enough destruction, began to understand what he meant. The Raxians had underestimated humanity. They would regret that mistake. What Ford had proposed wasn't some grand scheme based on cutting-edge technology or energy manipulation. It was a return to the basics, a weapon with a long history, one that could be used with terrifying efficiency. A simple tool of destruction that, in the hands of a human, could do far more than what any of the galaxy's high-tech weaponry could ever achieve. And so, while the Senate continued its debate over more conventional tactics, General Ford began to assemble his team, one that would rely not on flashy technology, but on something far more primal: the will to win, no matter the odds. He didn't need a fleet of starships, or laser-guided missiles, or plasma fields. He needed a team of humans with one goal in mind: to survive, to fight, and to bring the fight to the Raxians. The aliens, still convinced that Earth's weapons were nothing but a joke, would soon discover just how wrong they were. The room fell silent as General Ford stood. His movement was deliberate, confident, and his voice cut through the hum of uncertainty like a knife through air. For the first time in years, his words commanded the attention of the entire Senate. He didn't need to say much, only a few sentences, but it was enough to shift the atmosphere from mockery to shock. The problem, Ford began, his voice calm, is not that you don't have weapons. It's that you're not thinking like a soldier anymore. You've become too comfortable, too reliant on your advanced technology. You've forgotten what it means to fight like you're actually at risk. The commanders of the Zalthori and Oxyrians shifted uncomfortably, unsure where this was going. You can't defeat the Raxians by relying solely on your fancy weapons. The fight is bigger than that. The Senate collectively looked at him with raised brows. An awkward silence followed before one of the more senior Oxyrian commanders scoffed. You suggest we use something as primitive as human tactics? He sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Your people still use bullets, Captain. What can you possibly offer that we haven't already considered? Ford's gaze didn't waver. He knew exactly what they thought, but he wasn't about to back down. You're all blinded by your tech. You're used to hitting targets with precision weapons, using shields that absorb damage. But the Raxians don't play by those rules. Their gravity manipulation isn't something your energy shields can easily counter. They don't care about your fancy systems. They're chaotic, unpredictable. And that's where your greatest strength lies, unpredictability. He paused for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. I'm not asking you to use our outdated tech, Ford continued. I'm asking you to fight the way humans fight. To think outside your comfort zone. To be unpredictable. You think you can win by bombarding them from a distance, but they'll see that coming. They always do. It's time to think closer. Think up close, think dirty. Close combat, guerrilla tactics, no plasma shots, no energy waves. Just raw human ingenuity. And one weapon that might surprise them. The commanders exchanged puzzled glances. A human had just told them, the most powerful beings in the galaxy, to fight on their terms, with something as rudimentary as human tactics. Ford wasn't speaking of some exotic weapon or secret technology. No, he was talking about a simple tool, the shotgun. A weapon so ancient, yet so efficient in the hands of someone who knew how to use it. You want to know the truth? Ford said, leaning forward slightly, his voice carrying authority. While you're all standing around in your shiny ships and towering fortresses, thinking your energy shields will protect you, the Raxians will wipe you out. And when they do, they'll leave a reminder in their wake. Humans don't need fancy technology to kill. We just need something that works, something that gets the job done up close and personal. The room went quiet. The members of the Senate were beginning to grasp the gravity of the situation. Ford's words weren't just a plea, they were a challenge to everything they thought they knew about warfare. Your fleets are great at long-range combat, he continued, but when it comes to fighting in the trenches, when it comes to dealing with an enemy who thrives on chaos and unpredictability, you're out of your depth. You think you're invincible because you can fire plasma beams at distant targets? I'm telling you, that won't win this war. He turned and looked at the human representative from Earth, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room. Show them, Ford said. The man stepped forward, holding something that most in the Senate had never seen before, a shotgun. It wasn't some futuristic weapon or energy-based tool. No, it was a plain, old-fashioned firearm, single-barreled, simple, and yet deadly. The entire room stared in stunned silence as the human raised the weapon, demonstrating its simplicity. This, Ford said, is what will win the war. The Raxians will never expect it. The shotgun is a human weapon. It's unpredictable, it's brutal, and it gets results. Close-range combat. You get in their faces, and you make them regret underestimating you. The commanders from the Oxyrian and Zalthori empires looked on in disbelief. It was absurd. They had entire fleets of ships equipped with weapons capable of disintegrating a planet, and this man was suggesting they rely on an archaic weapon, something so far removed from their technological sophistication that it seemed laughable. But Ford's confidence, his cold determination, was enough to make them hesitate. His words had struck a chord. In the days that followed, Earth's tactics were put to the test. The Senate, with some reluctance, agreed to implement the new strategy. The human generals did not just use shotguns, they applied unconventional warfare tactics, exploiting the very flaws of the Raxians' chaotic style. Earth forces infiltrated enemy lines, operating not in the grand battles of space, but in the mud, the trenches, the shadows where the Raxians' gravity-based weaponry couldn't reach. And in those dark spaces, humanity's raw ingenuity, and yes, the shotgun, shined. The results were undeniable. While the advanced fleets of the Zalthori and Oxyrians engaged in large-scale space combat, Earth's human soldiers took advantage of their adaptability and ruthlessness. They fought in ways the Raxians had never encountered: ambushes, traps, and brutal, close-quarters combat. The Raxians, who prided themselves on their ability to manipulate gravity, found themselves caught off guard by Earth's unpredictable, human ingenuity. Within a week, the tide began to turn. The Zalthori and Oxyrians, while still recovering from the initial Raxian assault, began to gain ground. The shotgun became a symbol, not just of human resilience, but of the fact that it wasn't always the most advanced technology that won wars. It was the will to fight, the ability to adapt, and the unpredictable nature of humanity that made the difference. The Raxians were forced to rethink their strategy, their arrogance shattered. They had underestimated Earth's greatest weapon, not its tech, not its resources, but the sheer will and ingenuity of its people. General Ford's warning had proven true. The galaxy would never again look at humanity the same way. And in the end, it was a simple shotgun that proved to the universe that humans weren't to be underestimated. In the final victory, as the last of the Raxian forces withdrew, Ford stood before the Galactic Senate once more. The smug attitudes had disappeared, replaced by something new: respect. The message was clear: humanity had not only survived in the vast galaxy, it had proven that no matter how powerful or advanced others became, they could never replace what made humans truly dangerous: their capacity for survival, and the unexpected power of their most basic tools.